Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score studio. Welcome to the show. So, a nice weekend of some spoilers and also a nice start to this week of spoiler season because, yeah, we've already got a crazy exciting spoiler and some others. Let's jump into them. First up, oh my goodness, Stormbreaker. What a name for a card. Here we go. A 1/4 Otter Wizard with haste that costs 4 mana in red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of Stormbreaker, exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, so, this is exponential. This is just literally, okay, like, I cast a spell, I cast a spell, I cast a spell, I cast a spell, I cast a spell. Game over. My goodness, the power of this. Again, it's kind of like Scoot Swarm Ash is for like landfall Ash-ish, but this is like, hey, are you playing a spell slinger deck? Let's just cast all the cantrips, essentially. Let's cast all those ritual effects. Let's cast all those spells. So many in a turn, and then all of a sudden there are Stormbreakers everywhere. I mean, good luck with the math. Good luck keeping track of those tokens. I mean, you don't really need to keep track of them because they're going away at the end step. That being said, the game's going to be over. You're just going to swing out with these giant, I mean, they're 1/4s, right? But a giant amount of Stormbreakers. I mean, hundreds. You can really easily get to hundreds because you're multiplying it essentially every time. You're just going 2 times 2 times 2, or not 2 times 2, but you know, you're doubling it up every single time you do so. So, absolutely crazy. Definitely a great Storm finisher. I mean, I can see decks being built around this. It's quite spicy, quite fun. Yeah, really, really cool. Next up, Carrot Cake. A very cool name. Nowhere near as powerful as Stormbreaker, but still fun. Artifact food for 2 mana in white. Enters the battlefield, and when you sacrifice it, you make a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. You scry 1. Pay 2 taps, sacrifice it, you gain 3 life. Kind of like a food, essentially. Yeah, I mean, this one, we have seen like other ones like Servo Blueprints or whatever that one is, essentially, where like ETB and leaving the battlefield or sacrificed, I guess. This one specifically says sacrifice, not hitting the graveyard, so keep that in mind. Yeah, you make rabbits, you scry. So, I like Eggs deck might consider this potentially, but, or like a tokens deck, we shall see. Life gain 2 maybe can. Next up, Bumble Flowers Share Pot. What a name. Artifact for 2, enters, create a food token. Pay 5 taps, sacrifice it, destroy target non-land permanent, activate sorcery. I mean, when it comes to removal and colorless, we are getting more and more these days. Like, the Eldrazi stuff really helped. Yeah, being able to destroy specific things. Sorcery speed with this, it's not too bad. It's more specific, though, kind of in what kind of a deck might want to utilize this. Maybe more food-focused. Next up, Curious Forager, a 3/2 Squirrel Druid for 3 mana in green. Enters, you may forage. When you do, return target permanent card from grave to your hand. Kind of like Eternal Witness, but again, specific to permanence, so definitely worse than that. And also, you need that forage cost paid, so sacrificing a food or exiling 3 cards from a graveyard, your graveyard. Yeah, this one probably won't see too much play, except for very specific permanent-focused decks that also utilize the graveyard. So again, very specific. Next up, Early Winter instant for a lot of mana, 5 mana in total. Choose 1, exile target creature, target opponents, exiles enchantment they control. I mean, enchantment removal is sparse in mono black, essentially, but yeah, the opponent gets to choose what enchantment's gone. So, like, if you like really like need something gone, they might just be able to pick the other thing. So it's like, oh, Smothering Tithe. I'd like to lose that, but they've got a Fertile Ground. So they're going to get rid of the Fertile Ground. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, probably not really for commander play. Next up, Frilled Spark Shooter, a 3/3 Lizard Archer for 4 mana in red. Menace Reach. Enters with a counter on it if an opponent lost life this turn. Very much a limited card. Next up, Gossip Stallion. This one for just 2 mana in blue. Whenever a creature you control enters, surveil 1. Quite nice right there. A couple things to point out. Number 1, that it says creature you control enters, not non-token, meaning that it counts tokens as well. So that can be a lot of card selection for you. And surveil, better than scry in most situations because you can actually fill your graveyard things, and having things in your graveyard can be very good for certain decks. Level 2, whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less can be blocked this turn, so low the ground creature is evasive. Level 3, whenever a creature control deals combat damage to a player, you may exile it to return to the battlefield under its own control. Great for blink strategies out there. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of also like resets the creature in a way as well, like kind of like pseudo-vigilant-ish. But yeah, more so for like a blink deck could utilize something like this. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because like a couple of these things can go in different directions. Like low the ground creatures, cool. Also ETBs, but also like going wide, getting a lot of tokens out. Yeah, you can go to a couple different directions with this. I think the most use out of it is probably going to be for that first part where just like if you've got a ton of creatures in the deck, getting a lot of surveil. So again, like self-mill strategies might want to utilize it, but also, yeah, just great card selection from getting a lot of creatures out that can be absolutely huge for you. Obviously, if you really have other parts, you know, like, oh, okay, I got a blink deck. Okay, I can invest a good amount of mana in this to get that. Next up, Night Fisher, a 4/5 bird knight with flying for 5 mana in total in blue. Whenever another non-token bird you control enters, you get a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Okay, bird tribal. Shapeshifter tribal too as well. Other than that, probably nothing else. Next up, Light Shell Duo, a 3/4 rat otter for 4 mana in blue. Prowess when enters Surveil 2. I mean, Surveil 2 on enter is nice. It's card selection, not card advantage, but again, you can fill your graveyard, which is nice. The Prowess, this one's probably, again, either for very specific decks or more limited in function. It could maybe see play in like a blink deck, but I mean, Mold Drifter to actually just keep it in play would cost 1 mana more and still draw the cards. Also, that frog we just, talked about a couple episodes ago, the Simic one, also just draws you 2 essentially on ETB, like with stunning something, but you just stun self. Moving on. Might of the Meek, instant for a red mana. Target creature gains trample until end of turn. It gets +1/+0 until end of turn. If you control a mouse, draw a card. I mean, the mouse thing is nice, I guess, but you don't really care too much about that for the most part. This is the kind of card that players just look out for. They're like, okay, CMC, 1. Instant speed. Draw a card. Cool. And targeting as well for like feather style or, oh gosh, like Zada decks, or if you are degenerate like me with like, a prismatic bridge going into Ink Shredder Nephilim, winning the game in no time at all. Basically decks that want to be able to cast this either just a cantrip with 1 spell, like a Spellslinger type strategy, or ones that want to have this, turn into a lot of spells essentially and just draw you 10 cards for 1 mana. So, or Mouse Tribal, I guess. Next up, Nettleguard, a 3/1 Mouse Soldier for 2 mana in white. Valiant, whenever it comes to you target a spell or ability you control the first time each turn, it gets +0/+2 until end of turn. Pay 1, sacrifice your target artifact or enchantment. I don't know if you're not going to build around that Valiant part, essentially. That's not really what you're going to do with this. It's more so like one of the cards, one of the creatures that's like, okay, yeah, I can just be a decent threat if I'm out here. Hitting for 3 early, that's quite nice. It's not really, it can be a decent blocker as well. Obviously, it's not going to survive, but it can take some things out. That being said, what you really have it around for is okay, I can sacrifice this when I need to for 1 mana to take things out. Great, good for me. There's a lot of low to the ground ones. I think there's another one in white that actually just has flash. That's probably superior to this because, again, you don't really care about that Valiant. But still, if you're utilizing creatures for removal, you might want to consider this one too. Moving on, Otter Sport. Sorcery for 2 mana in blue. Create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature with prowess. If the spell is cast from anywhere in your hand, you get a counter on that creature. You can also flash it back. Very specific type strategy out there that maybe really just likes to have a lot of prowess creatures in play, or maybe a bunch of token generation. I mean, it's kind of slow for generating itself, but if you have say Brutaclad and you care about prowess, I guess, then sure. But I mean, this one seems pretty specific. Obviously, if you cast off the top of your library, you get extra benefit too, but just getting 1 counter on it, it's not all that impactful. Moving on. Overprotect, instant for 2 mana in green. Target creature control gets +3/+3 and gains trample, hexproof, indestructible up turn. I mean, if you're running a Voltron type strategy, this can be a really good card because it not only pumps and actually helps you get damage through that trample, but also, of course, more importantly, hexproof, indestructible. That's huge. I mean, these days, it's okay, hexproof, indestructible. You're okay, yeah, that should cost 1 mana. So I guess the other mana is the +3/+3 trample, which is Giant Growth. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, you can also just protect your entire team with Heroic Intervention for 2 mana. So do you care that much about do you care about the +3/+3 trample is really what you gotta ask yourself with this one. If so, yeah, cool. Consider it for those types of decks. Again, mostly probably Voltron, ones that want to get damage through the commander. And yeah, good way to protect it too. Moving on. Paw Patch Formation, instant for 2 mana in green. Choose 1 to destroy target creature flying, destroy target enchantment, draw a card, create a food token. It's interesting that draw card's an option on this one because typically you get these hey, destroy artifact or enchantment or creature flying or whatever. It replaces the removal for the artifact, but it gives you the ability to just replace this card if you need to. So it's kind of I mean, cycle it away if you don't need it, but also just get a food token too. So that's quite nice, I guess. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's going to replace other types of removal. I think typically you'd care more about okay, I've got ones that can remove creatures with if you're just in green, let's say with fight spells or whatnot. And then I've got, artifact and enchantment removal that are on the same card typically. Destroying creatures with flying it's nice, like when you're like, okay, I played against like an Dragon deck, great, like I can take out any of their creatures for like 2 mana, cool, good for me. But like there's other times when you're just like, oh, there's no creatures with flying in play or none that I care about because there's like a 1/1 Thopter, but I don't want to use this. So yeah, I don't think this one's going to see too much play except for in specific decks or decks that care about food. Obviously can definitely consider this one. Next up, Bloomcreed Escort, a 2/1 Bird Scout with flash and flying for 2 mana and blue. Enters, target creature control gains hexproof until end of turn. I mean, like a low to the ground evasive deck could definitely utilize something like this. It's a great card to just hold up, utilize it when you need to protect something. And like an opponent might try to take out your commander or whatnot. And you're like, okay, cool, yeah, no. So yeah, being able to have a low to the ground flyer like this that can protect things, that can be quite nice as well. Kind of like a protection spell, you can consider it, but also, yeah, I mean, part of your team. Next up, Salvation Swan, a 3/3 bird cleric with flash and flying for 4 mana in white. Whenever another bird you control enters, eggs up to 1 target creature you control without flying, return to the battlefield, under zone control a flying counter on the beginning next end step. Interesting. That seems very good for, bird tribal, I guess, because you can use and abuse ETBs quite easily. Again, without creatures without flying, I think there are definitely ways to like remove flying. Like, I guess Archetype of Imagination came to mind, but that'd have to be under control of an opponent, which would be ironic because then you could very easily go infinite with this, right? Because you could just blink it. I mean, it's at the end step, so I guess you couldn't go infinite with it. But you could just keep using and abusing it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a, gosh, what's the angel? There's a 4-mana angel. Goodness gracious. Now that's just going to bug me. Comments below, please. I should know that one. It's just off the top of my head. It's not coming. But yes, ETB, blink something. Obviously, if you have a blink deck, this can already just be good. If you've got a blink birds deck, even better. But yeah, being able to flash this in, quite nice. Next up, Splash Portal, sorcery for a single blue mana. Exile target creature control, then return to the battlefield, under zone's control. If you control a bird, frog, otter, or rat, draw a card. Yeah, if you have those creatures or changeling, obviously, cool. This is a cantrip that also blinks something for you. That's nice. And this is mostly going to go in like a blink deck. It's kind of like an Essence Flux, essentially. Like, we don't really see these in blue too often at 1, because I think Essence Flux might be the only one that does that at 1, technically, but I think that's an instant speed. So not being instant speed is a downside of this, obviously, because, yeah, you can't react. It's not like, oh, I can protect my creature that's being targeted by something right now. You have to just do this on your turn. Like, 1 mana blink something can be quite nice, obviously. I mean, for blink decks, definitely they consider it. And ones that have changelings, or specifically birds, frogs, otters, or rats, absolutely. But yeah, I think you probably most times, and I could be wrong on this, but I would say most times I'd prefer a blink spell, even if it's at 2, like a Siren's Ruse, to this at 1 if this is sorcery speed and that is instant speed, because I'd rather be able to utilize it as protection as well, or be able to utilize it whenever I need that ETB from that creature. So keep that in mind. Next up, Toth, Stalker Warlock, a 2/2 Lizard Warlock for 3 mana in black. Menace, when it enters, choose target opponent. If they lost life this turn, they reveal their hand. You choose a non-land card from it and discard that card. Otherwise, discard a card. I mean, very specific, like discard decks, maybe, but it seems overcosted for just discarding 1 card. It is like, you get to choose it, but yeah, if they lost life. But, so conditional choose, but no, probably not. Next up, 3-Tree Scribe, a 2/3 Frog Druid for 2 mana in green. When it or another creature leaves the battlefield without dying, put a counter on target creature control. That's specific. I mean, there's probably some weird combos you can do that too, but that's specific. But yeah, it's like if you blink creatures, if they're exiled, if they get returned to your hand, I guess, too. So very specific decks out there that also revolve around counters can definitely consider this. But like most of the time, if a creature's leaving the battlefield, for most decks out there, it is when it's dying. So you're not going to get any value out of this. Next up, Vine Reap Mentor, a 3/2 Squirrel Druid for 2 mana in Golgari. Enters or dies, create a food token. Yeah. If you've got a token-specific strategy out there, if you've got a food-specific strategy, getting 2 for 1 off of death is nice for a 3/2. Outside of that, probably not. Moving on, Whisker Veil Forerunner, a 3/4 Mouse Bard for 4 mana in white. Valiant. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell ability you control for the first time, each turn look at the top 5 cards of your library. Maybe reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them. You may put it on the battlefield if it's your turn. If you don't put it on the battlefield, put it in your hand. Put the rest of them on your library, random order. Interesting. So again, with Valiant, it is spell or ability. It's the first time each turn, so keep that in mind. That being said, like if you've got like a low to the ground creature deck that can target with either spells or abilities, I mean, if you definitely have like a commander that can target its like with abilities itself for your own creatures, that can definitely be very helpful to be able to make sure you can activate this. Yeah, being able to just like cheat those things out is huge. Being able to get them in your hand is nice, again, on your opponent's turns. So that's quite nice. Yeah, again, it's very specific in what it is. Top 5, if you've got like a low ground creature strategy, you're probably going to hit something that matches that. But yeah, you need a low to the ground creature strategy with, again, either a commander that can consistently target this with an ability, or you've got a lot of spells that target. So keep that in mind. But yeah, a good amount of value to be had for the right deck, obviously. Next up, Wix Patrol, a 5/3 Rat Warlock for 6 mana in black. Enters, mill 3 cards. When you do, target creature to opponent controls gets -X/-X. You'll have turn X grace mana value among cards in your graveyard. I mean, that's a ton of mana, essentially, for removal. I guess, like, a Blink strategy could consider this. Like, that also has mill. It's pretty specific, though. Moving on. Wishing Well, artifact for 4 in blue. Tap put a coin counter on it. When you do, you may cast target insert sorcery card mana value equal to the number of coin counters on it from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. That spell you put in your graveyard, exile instead, active on sorcery. It's a very interesting card. It's a very spicy card. It is, and you need to make sure that you read this correctly, like I'm reading it right now, just to be sure. You may cast target insert sorcery card with mana value equal to the number of coin counters on it, not equal or less. So essentially, you can't just be like, I'm just going to keep building this up every turn and then casting things consistently. This is like, oh no, you need to, I mean, have a decently wide spread of cards in your graveyard. Like, obviously the first one, you're like, okay, I want to, cast a 1 mana, next 2, next 3, next 4, next 5. But eventually, like, you're going to, and obviously if you do get to cast 4 cards out of this, that's well worth it, right? That being said, you can only activate the sorcery speed. So it's not like you can like, oh, okay, I'm going to wait because I've got a counter spell and I'm going to get my second counter on this. So I can like wait. I guess if you really have a bunch of counter manipulation, cool, then you can, I mean, there's only so many ways to take counters off, though. I guess blinking it, you could do that. It's interesting because there is a lot of value to be had from this for the right strategy out there. But again, you need like a graveyard that can be filled, or just like you're like a spell slinger deck that casts a bunch of spells, and that you are going to be getting enough value of this, and that you don't really care too much that it's at sorcery speed. So it's interesting. Obviously, there's ways to manipulate this. You can like untap and get more value out of it than one turn. If you really want to like speed things up and cast bigger things, you could proliferate with this too. So that could be something. That being said, you lose out on lower cards. So it's an interesting one for sure. For the right strategy, it could be very good. But for most strategies, I'd skip it. And then finally, we've got Baylen the Haymaker. Quite the name for this one because, my goodness, this is going to be throwing some Haymakers. This is going to be my quick take on this episode. I'm going to be covering this one. A 4/3 Rabbit Warrior for 3 mana in Naya. Tap 2 untapped tokens you control, add 1 mana of any color. Tap 3 untapped tokens you control, draw a card. Tap 4 untapped tokens you control. 3 counters on this against Trample on turn. I mean, I don't know if you need to do that ever because, sure, I guess you could utilize this as a win condition. Absolutely. And yeah, there's definitely ways to go infinite with this. And that could be just your win condition. You're like, okay, yeah, I swing, take that player out. But like, you probably want to take out all your opponents at the same time if you need to do that. That being said, things to notice on this card. It does not say creature token. It doesn't say non-creature token. Just any kind of a token. You're tapping 2. You're adding 1. It reminds me of, what is it, Birchlow Rangers? The elf for 1 mana that basically is like, hey, tap, is it tap 2 elves? There's one that's like tap 2 elves, add 1 mana of any color. Whatever that one is. Yeah, this is like that, but for all tokens, which is crazy. So you can do some crazy things. This is ramp. This is card draw. Again, just literally tap 3, draw a card is insane. And then, sure, if you like want to use this as a finisher as well, and you're just like, I've got 80 tokens lying around, I might as well just tap them and, pump this and hit opponents. So yeah, you can use this as a win condition too. It didn't really need that last part. But yeah, this is going to be, I think, a pretty popular commander because players do like tokens. It's one of the most popular strategies out there. And this just gives you access to, again, every kind of token you could ever want to utilize with this. It doesn't have to be creatures, doesn't have to be food, doesn't have to be treasures, whatever you want it to be. It can be all those things, and you just, yeah, toss tokens out there, get a ton of mana, draw a ton of cards, make more tokens. In Naya, yeah, there's a lot of good cards in Naya that can really help you out. So I'm going to be taking you through the budget buys, the pricier picks. If you're interested in these cards, on this commander, I think it's going to be a pretty exciting one. Make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. Now, with all that said, let's jump into them. So first up, let's move on to the budget buys. Cards within my budget, less than $1. Paragr took a 2/3 halfling citizen for 3 mana and green. If one or more tokens will be created under control, those tokens plus additional food token are created instead. You can also sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card, but why would you do that when you can tap 3 to draw a card instead? I guess if you're like desperate late game, you can be like, okay, I tap these, I draw a card, I sacrifice these, I draw another card. You could do that, so keep that in mind. That being said, this is a token producer that gives you additional tokens every time you're making a token, which is pretty crazy because basically, again, every single time, let's say this, triggers or whatever, you are making half a mana in a way. You're making 1/3 of a card in a way by just being able to have this in play, make other tokens, and saying like, okay, I get another food, I get another food, get another food. You just have this stash of food that you never plan to sacrifice for life, which you can if you really need to later in the game if you're desperate. But you can just say, okay, this is just, I'm making mana rocks basically with this. I'm making card draw engines with this. It's pretty crazy. Next up, speaking of which, Queen Alanal of Ruidark. I don't know how to say those words. Star, power touch equal number of creatures you control. Yeah, that's going to be absolutely massive. This can be a huge threat itself for just 3 mana. That being said, if one or more creature tokens are created under control, those tokens plus additional 1/1 soldier created instead. Again, getting additional tokens essentially for free is huge. Just being able to stack that up. Now, I will say there's kind of, I guess, 3 directions technically you could go with this commander. You could go like, okay, creature tokens, all creature tokens, and we'll talk about the benefits of that. And I'm actually going to lean a little heavier into that because there's some crazy things that you can do with that specifically with this commander. You can go all non-creature tokens again, like the Paragr took, like, okay, like, and Paragr can go in both. But yeah, being able to go like, okay, I just want food, I want, clues, I want cards that are harder to remove. Again, yeah, I mean, artifacts aren't the hardest thing to remove, but like a Wrath of God takes all your creature tokens. It does not take out all of your food tokens, so keep that in mind. So it's harder to deal with technically. Again, tokens are not creatures. That being said, there are benefits to having creature tokens. And then also the other path is kind of like a mixture of both. And I would probably do a mixture of both, but I actually, even though most of the time when it comes to like leaning on safe or not safe, like with ramp, I want to lean on ramp that is like lands, because lands are the safest type of ramp. When it comes to this kind of a commander though, I'd probably lean more heavily into creature tokens because there's some more busted things that you can do with that with this commander. I mean, like Horn of Gondor, let's just talk about this card really quick. Enters, you get a 1/1 human soldier creature token. By paying 3, you can tap and make X humans, where X is the number of humans you control. Basically, kind of like a Cranko, but for humans in a way, because you can just keep doubling up the number of human tokens you have. Just, again and again and again and again. And there's other cards to make humans too, but yeah, it can get out of control in absolutely no time. And with creature tokens specifically, it's easier to untap them. And we'll talk about those things here in a little bit. So you can like chain, like, kind of like ritual effects kind of in a way. Because again, you can utilize them for mana. You can also utilize them for card draw. You can just do absolutely absurd turns where you're just doing insane amounts of things with creature tokens. So keep that in mind. Next up, I mean, there's also very, very efficient production of creature tokens like Dragon Fodder. 2 mana, make 2 tokens. 2 mana, 2 1/1 goblins. Also, there's like, 3 for 3, and et cetera, et cetera. Increasing devotion, I mean, I guess 5 for 5. Create 5 tokens, but if you cast from a graveyard, 10 of those instead, so when you flash it back, you get 10. I mean, if you just cast this and flash it back, let's just consider that with this commander. That is 15 tokens. That is, what, 7 extra mana, essentially? 5 extra card draw whenever you're tapping those. And again, that's like every single time that they're untapped and you can tap them again. So I guess you say like each trip around the table, that's that, which is still quite nice. But of course, there's ways to use and abuse that. And again, if you have like the Horn of Gondor with that, that's crazy because again, they are humans. Next up, Secure the Waste, instant speed, make X 1/1 white warrior creature tokens. This is a deck, this is a commander that kind of builds on itself because the more tokens you get out there, the more mana that you have, and then the more spells you can cast, obviously, but also, like, the more mana you can just dump into a spell like this and be like, oh, okay, cool, I make 20 tokens. All right, next turn, I've got an extra 10 mana if I want that, or an extra, oh, gosh, math really quick, I guess 6 card draw, almost 7. There you go. Finale of Glory. Again, you got a lot of X spell ones, like X soldiers, cool, X 2/2s, but if X is 10 or more, you're getting X 4/4s with Flying Visions. So it can also be a win condition for you, which is kind of why I'm saying, like, I mean, that last part is nice on this commander because, like, that can be a way to win, and it can be a really difficult decision when you swing with this commander at someone with a bunch of untapped tokens. That being said, you don't necessarily need to do that when it comes to winning the game. Next up, Farmer Cotton. This is one that's amazing. I mean, it's a crazy good commander regardless. Enters, create X 1/1 halfling creature tokens and X food tokens. This gives you twice as many tokens as your X mana value, which is crazy because essentially This is like, okay, I paid, 10 into that X, whatever it is. Cool. I get an extra, basically now 10 mana per turn by just being able to tap those 2 tokens together, essentially. Yeah, it's like you're ramping with all these X spells. You are growing your army with these X spells. You're also drawing cards with these X spells. Your removal even can be, creature token production. Destroy target artifact, can be regenerated. X saplings, X its mana cost. Artifact mutation, a crazy good card with a token strategy. When it's just like, oh yeah, it's just removal. Oh yeah, destroy that. Cool. Oh, I got 4 tokens. Great, good for me. Okay, now I can use them for mana or use them for card draw. Azorius Predation, a Wrath that can help you out as well. For each creature opponent's control, you make a 4/4 beast. Each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So essentially, yeah, you take out the middling and the small creatures, and then you're left with a giant army. And also, sure, you lose some to the bigger creatures, but yeah, this usually wipes out most creatures and leaves you with an army too. That also now could also, if you really want to, tap for mana and tap for card draw too. And keep in mind, with creature tokens even if it's like summoning sick, it doesn't matter. Your commander is the one that has the ability. So it's saying you're tapping those creatures, so you can tap those creatures right away. They don't need haste to do so. They're not mana dorks. Next up, again, the reason why it's probably the way that I would build it would have like a combination of both a little bit. Like, again, I would include Paragr Took because, yeah, I'd like to have the extra food just for fun. That being said, I lean more heavily into creature tokens, even though they are more susceptible to removal because you've got spells like Vitalize. Very simple, very effective, in speed, 1 mana, untap all creatures you control. Again, if you have, say, 10 tokens in play, 10 creature tokens in play, you tap that for 5 mana, you cast this with 1 of that mana, you untap them, you tap them again. It's kind of like a ritual effect. Or again, like with card draw with them too, so keep that in mind. And obviously 10 tokens is like a minimum. You're going to be at a lot more tokens than that with this kind of a strategy. 2 arms, untap a creature control, draw a card. So again, it cantrips itself and also basically is a ritual effect for you. Then you can also get into, again, some broken things though, like Village Bellringer. Enters the battlefield, flash. Enters the battlefield, untap all creatures you control. Yeah, that's quite good because now all of a sudden you just untap all your creatures again on an ETB that can be used and abused. There are ways to bring this back to your hand so you can replay it. And again, if you have enough mana to basically just tap your tokens, I guess you would need what? Like, let's say that the effect, and we'll talk about one here in a little bit, costs 2 mana to bounce this back to your hand. If you have 12 tokens in play, 12 creature tokens, you're tapping for 6 mana. You spend 3 to cast this. You spend 2 to bounce it back to your hand. You got 1 extra mana. You do it again, again, again. Congratulations, you got infinite mana. Good for you. And then you can just, infinitely do that. And you can also just draw your deck and you win. Get infinite counters on your commander. Rules lawyers out there, not infinite, a trillion, whatever. You pick a number, okay? But also, like, any kind of, like, a blink effect like this one that's repeatable. Gilrain, I don't know how to say that name. 2/3 Human Noble for 3 mana in white. Pay 2, tap, exile under creature control. You may return to the battlefield under those control. You can also choose to do the end step. You won't do that with this because essentially you are going to just, exile my Village Bellringer. It comes back. Oh, it untaps this as well as all those creature tokens that I have. So yeah, being able to use and abuse creature tokens is a lot easier than when it comes to the non-creature tokens. That being said, you can do a mix of both as well. Next up, the pricier picks. And again, a reminder, every single one of these cards in the card list link in the description below. Parallel Lives, an enchantment for 4 mana in green. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. Again, doubling up your token production is insane. That's why these cards are so insanely expensive. So yeah, any of these kind of cards like this, Doubling Season, Primal Growth, whatever all those are, yeah, they're going to be good when you're like, I want to make a bunch of tokens. Good for you. Do so. I mean, Mondrak, a great one as well. 4/4 basically does the exact same thing. Doubles up tokens. That being said, you can also pay 1 for Phyrexian White, Phyrexian Right, sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures. Get an indestructible counter on this. So it can be really hard to deal with because you can make it indestructible as well. Overprotect, Deus Foundation. This one is even crazier. Hey, yeah, if 1 or more creature tokens you can control creates 3 times as many of those. Gross. Ugh, ugh. But yeah, basically, again, if you're leaning heavier into creature token production, obviously this can help you. Keep in mind, it does not triple up, because that's ridiculous. Anything else. It does not triple up your foods or, treasures, etc., etc. Also, at the higher budget, you get Seedborn Muse. A 2/4 Spirit for 5 mana in green. Untap all permanents you control during each of the player's untap step. Yeah, that's crazy. That's insane. That's, hey, I get extra lands every turn. Hey, I get, all these things. And also I get to untap all my tokens, which can tap for more mana, more card draw, whatever you're going to do every single turn. Quest renewal, though, whenever a creature control becomes tapped, haha, that's easy. Put a quest counter on this. So basically just like tap, okay, yeah, a couple of creatures. Done. As long as there are 4 more quest counters on it, untap all creatures you control during each of the player's untap step. Basically, Seedborn Muse, but for your creatures specifically. So yeah, quite easy to do. Being able to do that and just every single turn, untap your creatures, tap them for mana, tap them for card draw. What's not to love about that? I mean, Drum Bellare, again, exact same thing essentially. 2/1 flyer, untap all creature control during each of the players' untap step as well. Aggravated Assault, broken with this commander. Pay 5, basically 3 red, untap all creature control. If it's a main phase, additional combat phase, fall additional main phase, activate on sorcery. You don't even need those extra combats really to win. I mean, I guess like you just win essentially with this. Like you just win. Because if you have, again, let's say 12 creature tokens in play, which again is so easy to get to when you focus on with a deck like this, you have, 6 mana every single time you tap them. Cool. All right, you got an extra mana each time. You can just keep paying into this, untap your creatures, paying into this, untap your creatures, paying into this, untap your creatures, paying into this, you have infinite mana. Then you infinitely tap those creatures, or you infinitely cast things, you infinitely draw, whatever you're going to be doing, okay? You'll win. And also with those combats, you get your commander through too. So there's a lot of crazy things that you can do, again, when you focus heavily on creature tokens. Temur Sabertooth is the card that I kind of alluded to earlier. Just outside of my budget. Just outside of 14 cents more. 4/3 cat for 4 mana in green. Pay 1 in a green. Bounce a creature control back to its owner's hand. If you do, Temur Sabertooth gains indestructible till end of turn. Being able to protect this is quite nice, but also, again, in that situation with like Village Bellringer, and there are other creatures that you can utilize in that kind of untap effect, like Great Oak Guardian, though it does cost more. You can just say, oh, okay, bring it back to my hand. Okay, I play it again. Okay, bring it back to my hand. I play it again. Kind of like Gilrain, basically just, comboing and going crazy. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Also, when it comes to creature token production, though, Scribe's Hive. Hey, at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life, and you make a 1/1 Phyrexian Might that has Toxic 1 and can't block. And as long as opponents remove opposing counters on creature control toxic of lifelink, that's nice. What matters, though, is with this is it's basically like, hey, I'm like a Bitter Blossom kind of. All you really care about with this is that you are, again, just getting this down early. Every single turn, you just get a 1/1. Yeah, sure, you lose life. Who cares? And also, you get lifelink eventually with these things, too, which is nice. So, there you go. Being able to just have creature token production can be crazy. I mean, Tender Shoot Dryad, yeah. A 2/2 with Ascend. Beginning of each upkeep, you get to create a 1/1 sapling, +2/+2 to your saplings if you got the Sea's Blessing, which takes no time at all. Keep in mind, this is every single turn's upkeep, not just your own. So, with each trip on the table, you're making 4 tokens. Again, that's basically 2 extra mana each turn, or each trip on the table. And then, 1 extra card draw, which eventually becomes even more. So, yeah, pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, Call the Copper Codes. Used to be budget, then it wasn't budget. Now it's not budget again. Call the Copper Codes. Instant for 3 mana in colorless. And also strive it for an extra, in colorless, in white, for 2 extra mana, essentially, for each target beyond the first. So for 7 mana, you're targeting all opponents. Choose any number of target opponents, create X 1/1 human soul to creature tokens with X number of creature opponents control. Basically, for every single creature opponents control, you get a 1/1 creature token. Yeah, in Commander, that's pretty crazy because your opponents probably have a decent amount of creatures each, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just make 10 creature tokens out of nowhere for 7 mana, or like 20, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden, again, be able to utilize with this Commander. It's going to get crazy. Now, as this episode is coming to a close, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these cards. So let me know what your thoughts are on these cards. Again, like Stormbreaker, my goodness, what an apt name. Storm and breaking things. Yeah, that seems to be quite the crazy card. Baylen the Haymaker, though, a really cool new commander. If you're interested in that one, make sure you check out that card. Let's link in the description below. Stay tuned to this channel for more exciting quick takes and spoilers. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.